a gap between the conclusion and the premise. So anytime you see words showing up in the conclusion that do not show up in the premise, hi guys, that means that you are
I hope you're
going
having
to
a
likely
good day
be
today.
getting an assumption problem.
I hope you guys are having a good day today. Now that I finally finished my paper, if you've caught my last few lives, you've heard me complaining about a paper. I finally finished it. So now I actually have free time on my hands. So I thought we would do a little question review today. So if you can see on my screen, we're going to go over test 158 from Law Hub, and you'll just have to pull that up. But I think we'll go over some of the questions from section 4, because I was just looking through them and there seemed to be some good ones to go over. So I'm not quite sure how long I'll be on. I have plans later and I'm just waiting for someone to text me, so we'll see. But I hope you guys are having a good Sunday so far. I can't believe it's already January 4th. I don't know where time has gone / how time keeps passing so quickly. And I'm sure if you're taking the January LSAT, you kind of are feeling like that too. Let me know in the comments if you're taking the January or February LSAT. I'm going to talk a little bit just to give people time to pull the test up if they want to follow along. But if you're taking the January test, I hope you are making sure that you're getting good rest and have a plan to not be too stressed out before test day. I remember on my test day, I did like not sleep out all the night before and actually fell asleep during the test. So just know if that happens to you, it can still turn out okay. So know that the LSAT is just really, really hard. But yeah, let me know in the chat if you are studying for the LSAT or thinking about it. Today we're going to go over some questions from the Law Hub test, test 158. I'm not entirely sure how long I'll be on, but depending on how many people are in and how it's going, we'll see. But thank you guys for coming in and joining. Hi, Marvu. I take the January test this Friday. Good luck, Marvu. I know it's really stressful, but you're going to do great. And just know, if it feels really hard, it's because it is hard. Like if you talk to any lawyer and you tell them you're studying for the LSAT, they'll instantly like feel so much sympathy for you and be like, I remember that was so hard. So I feel for you, Marvu, and all of you taking January test. Hi, Abby. What is your biggest advice for RC? Oh, this is really good. So I'm going to try. I got this question last night. I'm going to try to remember everything I said. But I just posted my last night's live on YouTube, and that has a bunch of RC advice in it. So you might want to go look at it. But for the the number one thing that I tell students that it almost always instantly improves their score for reading comprehension is to pay attention to the first and last sentences of the paragraph. And if this live is helping you, please like and share and do the TikToky things. When I say look at the first and last sentences of the paragraphs, I say that because if you look at the correct answer choices in reading comprehension, like 65 to 70% of the answer choices are coming from the first and last sentences of the paragraphs. And the reason I say that is because the LSAT writes these passages to be really difficult to understand, and they put a lot of detail in the middle of the paragraphs. But like 80% of that detail, you're not going to get any questions on. So you don't want to waste too much time in the middle of paragraphs. So I always tell my students, especially on the scientific and the historical passages, the ones with like language that's really hard to understand and has unfamiliar words, make sure you pay close attention to the first and last sentences and less attention to the middle. My second suggestion, Marvu, yeah, I struggle with the passages. It's difficult to find the main point. That I'm glad you said that, Marvu, because that just reminded me. For main point, for main for main point questions, you want to look at the first and last paragraph, and this always trips my students up because there will almost always be an answer choice that talks about something from the first paragraph, but the answer choice they want talks about something from both the first and last paragraph. So in the reading comprehension section, the main points come from the first and last paragraph. So when in doubt and when you get a main point question, you want to look for in those paragraphs, and even more specifically, the first and last sentences of the first and last paragraphs. And I know that sounds like really specific and like that can't be true, but I promise if you just like going through a review and seeing where the answers come from, you'll notice that they are like a majority of the answers come from first and last sentences, and then those main point questions from the first and last sentences of the first and last paragraphs. So thinking of where you want to spend the most time is really important in reading comp. And my second suggestion for reading comp is to bring all of your logical reasoning skills over to reading comp. I was like scrolling through TikTok and I saw a live where someone said like, don't do that. And I mean, every tutor's different and every brain is different, but I think that's crazy. Absolutely bring all of your logical reasoning skills over to reading comp. And when I say that, I mean, you still want to be on the lookout for conclusion words like therefore, thus. You still want to be on the lookout for examples and counter arguments. You still want to be on the lookout for what types of evidence they're using. Are they using statistics to back up their evidence? Are they using like anecdotes to back up their evidence? All of those things, all of that gets tested on the reading comprehension section. So the reading comprehension section is truly just like a longer logical reasoning section. So like the amount of the way you think about your stimulus in the logical reasoning, you really want to think about each paragraph like being a stimulus in the logical reasoning section, because the questions are going to ask you, about the author's conclusion, or the author presents the conclusion of this other side. If you're prepared already looking for, after looking for your like same conclusion indicators and premise indicators, you're going to catch on to the structure of the passage. Remember, that's what the LSAT's testing you about. They're not testing you on like, did you become an expert and understand this like art movement or this like scientific phenomenon? They're testing like, do you understand the structure? Just like they're testing you the same thing on logical reasoning. Yeah, so those are my tips for reading comprehension. I hope that, let me know if that helped. And I think I saw, what did you say, Abby? I said something that I really liked. Yeah, a lot of the middle context is examples. You're exactly right, Abby. And that's so good that you noticed that. And I always tell my students, like, the first paragraph is like giving you the background information and setting up the problem. And then the middle paragraphs, you want, instead of reading for what the author is telling you, you want to read for how is the author telling you that. So like Abby said, she said a lot of the middle context is examples. She's exactly right. A lot of passages will use examples to create their argument. And I guarantee you those passages have questions about how does the author create their argument. Some passages may use the middle paragraphs to do like explanations and just state facts because some may not even have an argument. Some may just be explaining, which is a lot like some of the stimuli that we see in logical reasoning where you just have facts and no conclusion. So, again, I definitely suggest bringing your logical reasoning skills over to reading comp because you already have so much of like the knowledge you need to be able to get through the reading comp. I really think it's just mean that they call it reading comp. Marvu, yeah, I feel so unprepared for some reason. After this live, I'm scheduled to take a full test to see, and that's totally normal, Marvu. I mean, you can never be prepared for the LSAT. Like if any lawyer tells you like the LSAT is easy, like they're an a-hole because I've never like even partners at my because I already have my job for after I graduate. I'll be working at a firm in New York City next year, and like when I told my partners I was an LSAT tutor, I got unfortunately so much more work because they know that the LSAT is so hard. So feeling unprepared is super normal, especially for your first time taking it. And I'll say like the majority of my students, like the first time it sucks, but when the second time they always feel better. And so I definitely would say, and Marvo, I'm guessing this is your first test you're taking. So I'm sure you're gonna do great. And even if you decide you want to do better, the second test will definitely be easier the second time around. Um, and I always tell my students this too, like adrenaline kind of kicks in on test day too. So it's normal to feel like in the days leading up to the test, if you're feeling like, am I not getting like as many questions as I usually do, right? Or I feel like I'm doing worse. That's completely normal just because of like the nerves and the stress that come from test day approaching. So don't let that get into your head because like I see that with all of my students. And if this is helpful, please like and say, oops, I'm sorry for that loud noise, guys. Please like and share and please follow. I put a little bit about me at the top there, but I just love LSAT tutoring. I think it makes you really smart and not just in like for law school, but for everywhere else in life. And I think everyone can learn the LSAT. It's just a matter of like how much frustration are you willing to put up with. For some people, they're willing to put up with a lot of frustration to get better. Some people not willing to put up with a ton of frustration. But that's really like what the LSAT is. I think it's literally just like how much frustration can you put up with? Oh, Marvu, it's your second time. I took it previously in November. Do you think you feel better than the first time, Marvu? Or do you think you feel the same? It's really hard, I think, um, to predict how you're going to do because it's always a small element of luck. And no one wants to admit that. You want to like think you can control your score 100%. You can control your score like 90%, right? So that those test day jitters, like that's totally normal and it doesn't go away because if you take the LSAT, remember you're gonna be taking a bunch of law school exams where you'll have the same feeling. Then you have to take the bar, and in addition to the bar, there's another exam. Well, there's depending on the state you get barred in, there's other exams. But I just took the MPRE, which is just another like test you have to pass. It's a lot like the LSAT. So all of this pain is worth it because you're gonna have to do like this type of thinking for the rest of your career. Marvy, what advice do you have for the parallel reasoning questions? It's difficult because I'm full-time college student, full-time job. Marvy, I'm glad you said that because 100% it is so much harder to prep if you have literally anything else going on. Like when I studied, I was lucky and I studied during original like OG COVID. So there was nothing going on. So I was able to study from like March to August. And I mean, I was working, but it was like 5 hours, 5 days a week. But it was a lot. But I was working from home, so it wasn't so bad. But my students who are doing undergrad, like you are, Marvu, I feel so bad for them. And I would say, like, most of my students who are doing undergrad, a lot of them end up studying for like a year. And I think that's completely fine to do. If you have stuff going on, I think it's completely okay and it's worth it to stretch out your prep, um, so you don't burn yourself out and you give yourself a better chance. But you are absolutely right, Marvu. Literally having anything going on. Like, if you get, I had a friend who got broken up with while she was studying for the LSAT, like the worst thing ever to freaking happen. Like, if you have anything going on while you're trying to study, it is super, super difficult. And so, if that's your case, like, you should know that like, it is really, really hard. I mean, people quit their jobs, and I know not everyone can do that, and like, I can't do that. I don't know many people who can, but like, people will quit their jobs just to study for like 3 months full time. And 3 months full time is can equal a lot stressed out. I mean, sorry, stretched out. So, you can always think about that balance too. But yeah, Marvu, you were on, that's 100% a real thing. And I can't tell you how many students I've had come in here and say like they're doing other things, like working, or some, are married or have kids even. Anything going on is really hard to do with the LSAT. So like, mad respect for sticking with it. Would you suggest taking an LSAT every week if I want to take the LSAT in June? Hi, RLT. More so, what should studying look like for someone new to studying and wants to take in June? So, RLT, what I would suggest, and this is just my personal suggestion, I would not start out by taking a practice test every week. The first thing that I have my students do is, oh my gosh, I'm up to 2.5K likes already. Thank you guys. That's crazy. I would say the first thing you want to do is take an LSAT cold. And that just means like no prep. And I don't know if you've done that already, RLT, but you want to take a diagnostic test so you can see just exactly what your baseline is without any studying. Because that gives you a good idea of like, how much work you're going to have to put in. And that number doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't say anything about how high you can get. It just, it just tells you where you are. So that's the first thing I would do. Then I would research different resources. So the resource I recommend and I really like and I didn't have a tutor when I was studying, but I used the Power Score books. And I took the exam and had logic games on it. And I used Power Score for logic games and logical reasoning. So I really liked Power Score. And literally what I did was I opened up the book from page 1 and had a blank notebook. And I took notes on every single chapter and did all the exercises in every single chapter and did it from the front of the book to the end of the book. And then when I finished the book, or I probably say when I got maybe like halfway through the book is when I started doing like practice tests, maybe like every 2 weeks. But I would suggest shopping around for resources, looking around at resources and trying out different ones. Like, I know people, like, I really like Power Score. The reason I like Power Score, and this is how I teach my students, and I think I'm a good tutor. Well, I know I'm a good tutor, so it works. But why I like Power Score is because they teach you the logic concepts, and then they work your way up to full LSAT questions. And I like that because I can't tell you how like frustrating it can feel if you're trying to like understand like the logic concept, like what conditional reasoning is, while you're trying to decipher this like effed up long sentence that they wrote. It's too much to do at once. So like, I have my students, and if you look at my profile, like all my examples are like little tiny examples or little rules, and that's how I teach my students. So like, we might go like 2 or 3 weeks before we see before we do a full LSAT question. And that's how I suggest preparing, because I think that's the way to make LSAT prep like as least miserable as possible. is to work your way up. So learning the logic concepts and then working your way up to a full LSAT question. And I really like Power Score because I think Power Score does a really good job of that. I do not get paid by Power Score. I just like them because they taught me LSAT. Um, I will say they released these new workbooks, these little workbooks. I do not think the workbooks are worth it. They don't have that. Um, they don't have they don't really add that much at all. They just have practice tests in them basically. But the big books, like the Logical Reasoning Bible, and I think the Reading Comprehension Bible is good. Um, but I like the Power Score books. Um, but I also suggest looking around at oh, good. Good, RLT. That's awesome that you already got a baseline. So yeah, I really like Power Score. My students, even ones like Tutor, will sometimes have 7 Sage too. Um, and I know a lot of students have come in here talking about Loophole. I I'm a little behind on like getting caught up on what resources are out there because I've been tutoring. But everyone in the chat, give RLT all the suggestions if you have them. Um, Hi, Toby. Yes, Logic Games is gone. Um, yeah, I took the exam and I had Logic Games. I wish Logic Games was still on there. I liked Logic Games. And it was the easiest section for my students to improve on. So, and I don't know, it was always fun watching them improve. So I'm kind of sad that's gone. But yeah, no more Logic Games, Toby. Um, Nancy, how often do you go live? That is a great question, Nancy. I'm trying to figure it out. I really want to start a schedule or do, I don't know. You guys let me know well, I'm getting a lot of follows, so I feel like this is super helpful. And I want to do schedule lives where because like I get distracted really easily when I do lives like this because I like talking to the chat. I want to do lives where like I actually like am going through the questions and then do question time later. But that takes a lot of focus. So I want to go live this week. Nancy, my answer to your question is I don't know when I normally go live. I just started this like a month ago, but I'm figuring it out. So that's my answer, Nancy. I'm not like the reason that I started the TikTok is because I really like tutoring, but I just don't have as much time for it. And because I'll be working at like a big firm in New York City next year, I definitely won't have time for it then. So I want to try to find ways where I can just like hop on for like an hour or so and do some lives. Do you do one-on-ones? I paid so much in tutoring and still feel confused. Nancy, DM me because I'm on winter break and I think I'm going to start taking some one-on-ones while I'm on winter break. I usually charge $100 an hour, but I think I'll offer like $50 for 30 minutes, but just DM me. And we can also message too and working, like I can also help over message too. We can work something out. So just message me. But yeah, I think because I don't go back to school until I don't know when, but in a week or so. So I have some time. And then I may continue doing tutoring. I don't know. You can tell I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm here talking to you guys about it. So thank you. Let me make sure I didn't miss any other questions. Yeah, RLT, going to need to create a regiment because of a full-time job. Yeah, I would definitely look up like LSAT schedules. Um, there's a lot of, I think there's a lot of really good ones out there. And I would just say, don't pressure yourself to rush. So, 100%, obviously you want to get into law school sooner than later. But if you do have other things going on, don't be afraid to take longer with your prep for a possibly higher score. And that's just my opinion. Just because I like, I don't know, your LSAT score can get you a lot of scholarships. So if you can stretch out your prep is always a good time. So really all I'm saying is if you feel pressured to rush, you don't have to feel pressured. Yeah. And I mean, this is coming from someone who took 7 years from undergrad to law school. So, of course, I would say you don't have to rush, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with stretching out your prep if you need to. But okay, I know I started this out saying we were going to go over some LSAT questions. So let me at least go over this first one from section 4 of test 158. And then Nancy, I'll answer your question about law school because I also love talking about law school. So I can't show the question, probably can't read it out loud, but I'm going to read it out anyway. So the question says, the government's tax collection agency has not followed through on its plan announced a year ago to crack down on violations of corporate income tax law. So whenever I read, after every sentence, I do a translate in my head. And usually that's like by jotting down notes on scratch paper or on the screen. So if I gather what this person is saying, in this first sentence, they're saying agency didn't crack down on corp tax violations. They announced a year ago. Okay. Let me see if I can make that bigger. Okay. The next sentence says, audits are the primary tool for detecting such violations, and over the past year, not a single audit of corporate income tax return has been completed. So the reason they're saying the agency hasn't cracked down like they said they would is because no corp income tax audits completed over last year. So here, this was our conclusion. And you could tell this is a conclusion because it honestly sounds like an opinion. It's because saying the agency didn't crack down like they said they would is an opinion. And then they're giving us the evidence for it, which is your premise. Okay. So I haven't taken federal, I signed up for this semester. I'm not taking federal tax. I'm not looking forward to it. I get what this means, but I don't really get what this means, So, but what I can gather is they're saying, just purely looking at the words, they're saying because the agency has not done any corporate income tax audits over the last year, that means the agency has not followed through with its plan to crack down on corporate tax violations. Okay. After I read an argument, I always ask myself, oh, thank you for the roses, Nancy, and thank you guys for the likes. Please like and share and send hearts, I think, whatever makes you part of my fan club, because I want to start doing super fan lives where I'll go longer. So do that too. Thank you guys. After I finish a stimulus, I ask myself, does that argument make sense? And if I'm being completely honest with you guys, I don't know. I don't know if this makes sense. It kind of sounds like it makes sense. If they didn't do any audits, then they probably didn't crack down. But what it makes me wonder is how important are the income tax audits for the violations? Is it the only way to find violations? So any type of thinking you do before you get to the question and answer choices pays off. So the reason I'm focusing on the income tax audits is because it comes up in the premise, but it doesn't come up in the conclusion. I don't understand what the link is between the income tax audits and the cracking down on corporate tax violations. Now, I also notice that both the premise and the conclusion talk about a year, which makes me think the time might be important. So this question is asking us, which one of the following, if true, most weakens the argument? So they're asking us to weaken. When we get a weaken question, you're always weakening the conclusion. So when I say you're always weakening the conclusion, I'm saying whatever answer choice you choose should, even if it weakens the conclusion, connect your premise to your conclusion. And so let's go through our answer choices to see what that means. And if I'm reminding myself what we're trying to weaken, the conclusion was the agency did not crack down and did not follow through on their plan. So we want to weaken, in other words, we want to make it seem like maybe they did follow through with their plan. Maybe that isn't true. So answer choice A and this is, I didn't say which question this is, but this is number 1. Answer choice A says the plan to crack down on violations of corporate income tax law is part of a broad campaign against corporate misconduct. So the first thing I think about is it does not do anything to impact the conclusion. And how do I know that? Because it doesn't link anything in our premise to our conclusion. So the conclusion is about corporate tax violations. The answer choice A is about corporate tax violations, but it doesn't connect to the argument at all. This answer choice doesn't have anything to do with the audits. And the audits are the part that we want to focus on because they're the part that is not mentioned in the conclusion. So it's already weak because they're making this conclusion about violations, but the premise, the evidence they're relying on is about tax audits. That's where the weakening is probably going to come from because you want your conclusion and your premise to be talking about the same things. So answer choice A, saying the plan to crack down on violations is part of a broad campaign against corporate misconduct, it doesn't have anything to do with whether or not the agency actually did crack down on the conduct. Answer choice B says the number of personal income tax returns audited over the past year is greater than the previous years. Okay, answer choice B, my ears perked up when it said personal income tax returns because our conclusion and our premise is talking about corporate income tax returns. So answer choice B wouldn't impact our conclusion either because it's talking about personal income tax returns, not corporate income tax returns. If I look at answer choice C says most audits of corporate income tax returns do not reveal any significant violations. Okay, so this one looks more promising. It does mention the corporate income tax returns, and it does mention the audits. But remember, the evidence was that they haven't done one corporate income tax audit. So the fact that most audits don't return significant violations, that doesn't mean one couldn't. It probably won't, but one still could. If it said all audits of corporate income tax returns do not reveal violations, this would be a better answer choice. But saying most still leaves room for, well, if they had done one, they might have caught somebody. Answer choice D says it generally takes longer than 1 year to complete an audit of a corporate income tax return. So let me see again what our conclusion is about. The conclusion is the agency didn't crack down on the corporate tax violations that they announced a year ago. Well, this answer choice is saying it takes longer than 1 year to complete an audit. Why did they say that the agency wasn't cracking down? They said it because the agency hadn't completed an audit over the past year. Answer choice D tells us it takes longer than 1 year to complete an audit. Well, then it kind of doesn't become fair to say that the conclusion, it doesn't become fair to say that the agency isn't cracking down on them just because they haven't done one in a year. Because if it's impossible to go to, not impossible, it doesn't say impossible, but if it generally takes longer than 1 year, then that doesn't automatically mean that the agency isn't cracking down. It just may mean they haven't done it yet. They haven't finished yet. And so answer choice D is our correct answer here. And a hint that we had to that was, if you look at our conclusion and our premise, they both talk about a year. That's not a mistake. The LSAT writers write this for a reason. They put that time length in both the conclusion and the premise for a reason. So seeing it come up in the answer choice, it should, when you see that answer choice D, it should honestly kind of feel like a click, like oh, that's how they're going to weaken it. Because the 1 year is mentioned in the premise and conclusion, and it's a limiting factor, meaning it's like, it puts like a limit on what we're talking about. And that's exactly what answer choice D exposes, that the conclusion doesn't pay attention to that box of the 1 year. And answer choice E says over the last 5 years, fewer audits of corp income tax returns have been completed than in the preceding 5 years. So that's closer to the correct answer choice-ish, but 5 years is not the window of time we're talking about. If you look at my notes, my conclusion and the premise both talk about 1 year. Answer choice D talks about 1 year. Answer choice E talks about 5 years. That doesn't fit into our window. And also the fact that the fewer audits doesn't necessarily mean that the conclusion doesn't weaken the conclusion, but really the biggest problem with E is the 5 years. So I hope that was helpful. Hopefully some of you were able to follow along. Please send some likes or some diamonds or gifts or hearts me's or whatever the things are I'm supposed to ask for. I really need to learn. But please let me know if that was helpful. And let me get to answer some of these questions. Nancy, is law school difficult or more time consuming? Yes and yes. I love law school, but in general, but you will also hate law school. I think the LSAT is really good preparation for law school, even though I know some people say it's not. The reason I think it is because to get better at the LSAT, you have to be able to admit when you make mistakes, admit when you don't understand something, and then go and fix it. And that when I say go and fix it, that means like, I don't know, listening to someone random on TikTok explain it, or going out and like Googling and finding explanations that make sense to you. And it's the same kind of deal in law school. So that's the time consuming part of law school, because like, yes, you have professors that like lecture and teach, but you're gonna get times where you're like, I still have no idea what that means, and you have to go out and find your own explanation. And that's the really time consuming part of law school. And it's also the really frustrating part. So yes, law school is very hard. Yes, it's time consuming. Yes, it's difficult. Um, you'll definitely feel frustrated, but the good news is by the time you get to your third year, which is I only have one semester left, we call this year 3L, but we really call it 3LOL. Because by the time you're in your third year, you feel like you've already got it down and you know what you're doing. So the first year is the hardest. The second year, I think, is the busiest. And then your last year is like your 3LOL year. The baddie library. When are you going live again? Oh my gosh, everyone probably hates me. I need to come up with a schedule. I have ADHD and I'm so bad at keeping a schedule. I will keep a schedule. So the baddie library, just keep checking back on my profile. I'm gonna try to go live again tomorrow. I don't have a set schedule, but figure something out. Because what I would, thanks, the baddie. Nancy, I'm on the East Coast, Nancy. Oh yeah, you're in my fan club, Nancy. Yeah, definitely please like and heart because, like, I don't know, the more attention I get, the more often I'll go live and the longer I'll go live. What I really, so, okay, for you guys here, I'll tell you what I would really like to do, and you can tell me what you think. What I would really like to do is just do like a couple times a week going live for like an hour and a half, even 2 hours, and then just like charging like $10 a month while you're prepping, or maybe like, I don't know, like $3 a week or something like that. That would be like my goal. And I would like to do that because I really like answering your questions in chat. So I'm trying to figure out a way to make that happen. So if you know how to do online things and you would like to exchange LSAT for helping me with online stuff, please DM me. Because you'll notice this once you are in law school, you realize like how important time is, and I just don't have the time to like figure out how to make this work, but I want to make it work. Oh my gosh, thank you for all the heart puffs and stuff. That's so fun, Nancy. Thank you guys. Okay, I know I only made it through one question. Let me get through another one. Thank you guys for the likes. Let's go to question 2. Okay. Oh no, that's not what I wanted to do. Okay. So for number 2, I see this is by a columnist. So automatically when I see it's a speaker talking, I think that, okay, this is probably going to be someone's opinion. Usually it's them disagreeing with something, but I don't know that for sure. But that's what I'm thinking. So let's take a look. And thank you guys again for the likes. The columnist says, making some types of products from recycled materials is probably as damaging to the environment as it would be to make those products from entirely non-recycled materials. So I'm going to split that sentence in half. And so it says making some types of products from recycled materials is probably as damaging. So making things from recycles equally damaging as from non-recycled. And you could write this. These are the types of notes I take. If I was taking notes on the test, like you wouldn't be able to understand. Like I probably would have like left a bunch of words out. And it doesn't have to make sense to anyone else when you're on the test jotting down notes. It just has to make sense to you. So I probably would have drawn like arrows and equal signs and things, but I'm trying to make it make sense to you guys too. So so already I'm thinking that's probably the conclusion, because that's kind of a loaded statement to make, saying that making things from recycled materials is just as damaging as making them from non-recycled. So let's see why the columnist is saying that. The columnist says in the second sentence, the recycling process for those products requires as much energy as producing them from raw materials, and almost all energy production damages the environment. Okay, so the second sentence I'm also going to have to split up. So they're saying the recycling process for those products requires as much energy. So making recycled things requires equal energy, as much energy as producing them from raw materials, as raw. And almost all energy production damages the environment. Almost all energy production damages the environment. Okay, so here's our conclusion. Thank you guys for the likes. Here's our premise. And instantly when I read the premise, and I saw this part, almost all energy production damages the environment, the almost all stood out to me, because this is a very common LSAT trap. If they're saying almost all energy production damages the environment, what that makes me think is it possible that this type of energy production does not damage the environment? Is this the tiny percentage that's outside of the almost all? That's the first thing that I start to wonder. So when I think about what the conclusion is making things from recycled materials is probably equally as damaging as making it from non-recycled. And the reason they say that is because making recycled things requires equal energy as raw materials, and almost all energy production damages the environment. So let's look at what the question's asking. The question asks, what is the reasoning most vulnerable to? Okay, so this is a weaken question. Okay, so I'm thinking about what would weaken the conclusion. And I have to remind myself, what's the conclusion? The conclusion is making things from recycled material is probably equally as damaging as making it from non-recycled. And the premise is saying that because the production of those materials requires energy, and energy harms the environment. Okay, so I'm going to be honest. When I look at this, I can't predict exactly how they're going to weaken it. I'm not entirely sure, but I know the correct answer choice is going to have to impact the conclusion. So let's go through answer choices and see how these impact the conclusion. So answer choice A says the reasoning is vulnerable because it uses the word environment in one sense in a premise and in a different sense in the conclusion drawn from that premise. I don't think so. I think that environment is still being talked about in the same thing. When they say damaging to the environment in the premise and damaging to environment in the conclusion, I think they're talking about, like the earth, the environment. I don't think the issue here is that they are they are talking about different types of environments. The issue here that stands out to me is just that this is a very strong statement to make, saying that just making these materials is just as damaging. Let's look at answer choice B. Answer choice B says the author treats an effect of energy-related damage to the environment as if it were instead a cause of such damage. So again, if we think about what the conclusion is talking about, the conclusion is talking about making products from recycled materials. Answer choice B, saying it treats an effect of energy-related damage, we aren't talking about the effect of energy-related damage. We're talking about the damage from making products out of recycled materials. And so to put it in an even finer point, our conclusion doesn't talk about energy at all. Our premise talks about energy, but our conclusion does not talk about energy. Answer choice B focuses on energy-related damage. We aren't talking about energy-related damage in the conclusion. We're simply talking about environmental damage. So answer choice B doesn't impact the conclusion either. So, and if this is helpful, please like and share, guys. Let's take a look at answer choice C. Answer choice C says the author fails to consider that the particular types of recycled products that it cites may not be representative of recycled products in general. Well, answer choice C doesn't connect to the content of the argument. The argument wasn't saying that a certain type of product made from recycled materials is damaging. The conclusion said basically all products made from recycled materials are environmentally damaging. Answer choice C says the author's talking about particular types of products. The author isn't talking about particular types of products. The author's talking about the materials the products are made out of. So answer choice C does not connect to our conclusion either, especially because our conclusion is comparing recycled products to unrecycled products. Answer choice C only compares recycled products to other recycled products. So answer choice C is not impacting our conclusion either. Let's look at answer choice D. Answer choice D fails to consider that making products from recycled materials, okay, that connects to the conclusion, may have environmental benefits unrelated to energy consumption. Okay, so this answer choice talks about energy consumption, which is brought up in the premise, and the recycled materials that are brought up in the conclusion. And it says it fails to consider that these products may have environmental benefits. Well, our conclusion says that recycled materials are equally environmentally damaging. Answer choice D says maybe recycled materials have environmental benefits. That does go directly against the conclusion. If it had benefits, then maybe it's not as damaging as non-recycled materials. Additionally, if it has environmental benefits unrelated to energy consumption, then that also means that the premise becomes irrelevant. Because saying if the premise is almost all energy production damages the environment, and that's why recyclable products are damaging to the environment, if we had benefits from these recyclable products, that would balance out the damage. So answer choice D sounds pretty good because it's bringing up the possibility that recyclable materials, even if they have the same damage footprint from the production as non-recyclable materials, it could still have benefits. And that would make it go against the conclusion. And so that's why answer choice D is correct. Because it fails to consider that the recyclable materials may have benefits that level out the damage that they say in the conclusion. And answer choice E, let's take a look at that one. And thank you guys for the follows and likes. Answer choice E says, presumes that simply because one phenomenon follows another phenomenon, the earlier phenomenon must be a cause of the later one. So if I look here, the author isn't assuming any phenomenon. In fact, the author's just kind of describing a fact. And when I say that, I mean the author's telling us that in the premise that making recycled things requires as much energy as making raw things, and almost all energy production damages the environment. Those are not phenomenons. Another way to think about answer choice E is saying it must be a cause of the later one. This stimulus isn't making any cause and effect comparisons. What it's making is it's making a comparison between two groups, which is the non-recyclable products and the recyclable products. Answer choice E says that the author is making a mistake about cause and effect, but the author isn't making any conclusions about cause and effect here. And so for number 2, that's why answer choice D would be correct. It's the only one that directly goes against the conclusion, because the conclusion was that making recyclable products is equally as damaging as making non-recyclable ones. Answer choice D said maybe the author didn't consider that recycled materials could have benefits that are not canceled out by the production. And so that is why answer choice D is correct. And most specifically, answer choice D links the premise and the conclusion, which is how you can weaken an argument, because you're not going to weaken an argument by choosing an answer choice that only connects to the conclusion or only connects to the premise. You want an answer choice that connects to both the premise and the conclusion, or a premise and the conclusion. And that's what answer choice D did, because it connected the energy consumption, which came from the premise, to the environmental damage. The reason it connected to environmental damage is because it brought up environmental benefits. That's the opposite of environmental damage. Answer choice D weakened the environmental damage in the conclusion. So let me know if that helped. And please give me a like if you're still here watching. And then I'll stay on for a little bit more. Maybe we'll go on to question number 3. Yeah, I actually think number 3 would be a good one to go over. Okay, so this one, here's 2. Let's do 3. Okay. So number 3. Okay. So number 3, we have a physician. So already I'm thinking the physician's going to probably like be making some kind of argument or disagreeing with somebody. So let's see. The first sentence says, we are constantly bombarded by warnings based on initial studies, tentative conclusions about this or that food having adverse health effects. Okay, so if I translate what the physician said, physician thinks people are always being warned about the effects of food. The second sentence says, if the medical establishment wants people to pay attention to health warnings, it should announce only conclusive results, the kind that can come only from definitive studies. So the physician is saying we get constant warnings about nutrition in food. He says if want people to pay attention, only announce for sure results. And it says after all, and when I see after all, that's like in the last sentence, that's like a huge like sign that this is a conclusion. Or I'm sorry, this is a premise. So I always think, okay, after all is a huge signal that this is a premise. So it says, after all, people who are constantly subjected to fire drills eventually come to ignore the fire alarm. Okay, it's kind of a weird premise, but I'm going to jot it down. So the author is saying, after all, basically saying too many fire drills, people will ignore fire alarm. Okay, so if I go back just to recap what we read on this question, the physician's telling us, oh, thanks for the follow. The physician's telling us we get constant warnings about nutrition and food from like maybe studies. And they're saying if you want people to actually pay attention, we need to stop giving tentative study results and only give for sure study results. And the reason for that is because too many fire drills, people will ignore the fire alarm. Meaning, if people are being like warned unnecessarily too many times, they're going to start ignoring the warnings. So let's look at what this question is asking. And the question is asking, and please like if this is helping, or if you're taking the LSAT soon, let me know in the chat. This question is asking, the statement that people who are constantly subjected to fire drills eventually come to ignore the fire alarm plays which one of the following roles in the physician's argument? Okay, so it said after all, so already I know it's a premise because after all is a premise indicator. It's giving us evidence to back up our reasoning. For example, I might say like, Kendrick Lamar is the best rapper. After all, see the Super Bowl. the halftime show. That's my evidence. After all, is an evidence indicator. So before I even look at the answer choices, I'm making a prediction that this last sentence is a premise. So let's go to our answer choices. Answer choice A says, it is presented as an example of the sort of warning referred to in the argument's overall conclusion. Okay, it's definitely not an example because the premise was about food and nutrition warnings. The last sentence was about fire drills. So it definitely wasn't an example. So let's look at answer choice B. Answer choice B says it is a statement that plays no logical role in the argument, but that instead serves to impugn the motives of the medical establishment. In this answer choice, saying it plays no logical role is not true because it does play a logical role. It explains the pattern or like the trend that the author is noticing. And then it says the only role is to impugn the motives of the medical establishment. The physician never was saying anything bad or impugning the motives of the medical establishment. He was just giving the medical establishment a suggestion. So answer choice B doesn't quite fit. If I go to answer choice C, it is an analogy. Okay, that sounds pretty good. I do think it is an analogy and offered in support of the argument's overall conclusion. I also think that is true because remember I said that it was a premise, this last sentence. After all, premise supports the conclusion. And it is an analogy because we aren't actually talking about fires, we're talking about nutrition. He is comparing the warnings for nutrition to fire drills. So answer choice C is our correct answer because it correctly identifies that the fire drill sentence was an analogy for warning people about nutrition too many times or unnecessarily. But let's check our other answer choices before deciding for sure. Answer choice D, it is an analogy. Okay, that sounds good. That forms part of a specific objection to the argument's overall conclusion. Objection meaning a disagreement. But remember, the fire drill sentence is in support of the conclusion. Answer choice D says it's an objection. That is not right. So answer choice D, even though it looked good at first with the saying it's an analogy, it is not correct. Let's look at answer choice E. Answer choice E says it is an analogy, it also sounds good, offered to clarify the distinction the physician makes between an additional study and a definitive study. Well, remember, the analogy says if there's too many fire drills, people will ignore the fire alarm. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for just 1 second. Even this one was a little tricky because E kind of sounds right, but saying to clarify the distinction the physician makes between an initial study and a definitive study. The premise is being, the too many fire drills sentence is being used to support the overall conclusion, which is if you want people to pay attention, you have to only announce the for sure results, meaning, the for sure results of the studies. This is actually a hard one. Why? I think so. Answer choice E, it is an analogy offered to clarify the distinction the physician makes between initial study and a definitive study. So I would say, constantly subjected to fire drills eventually come to ignore the fire alarm. Okay, so for answer choice E, answer choice E, he's not making the distinction between the studies. He's not saying that the fire drill is less important than the real fire. What he's saying is simply that if you give out too many fire drills, people will start ignoring the fire alarm. So the issue wasn't about trying to get the medical establishment to define what's an initial study and what's a definitive study. The purpose of including this analogy was to just support the conclusion that you should only announce the for sure results. So it wasn't used just to clarify a distinction. It was because it wouldn't clarify anything. If he wanted to clarify something, then he would have to actually explain what the difference between the two the difference between why the fire drills and would cause someone to ignore the fire alarm. He's not trying to explain why that happens. He's just saying that's the exact same pattern as what's happening now. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I hope this was super helpful. Please like and follow. I'm probably going to go live on YouTube a little bit later today, so if you want to catch that, definitely check out my YouTube. Thanks so much, guys, for all the likes and gifts, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. Bye.